Hello, Truth Warriors. Today's guest could have followed the path of many other filmmakers, but instead he chose to handle and expose what has been the real elephant in the room since 2020. And now he has a series of undeniable evidences that most of you watching will know as Plandemic. Because we unearth every day more truths exposing the lies that humanity is drip-fed, more censorship and restrictions are forced upon us. But that won't stop Mikki Willis as he continues to document the biggest hoax perpetrated upon mankind. And here today to discuss his latest masterpiece is the man himself. Hello, sir, and welcome to the Atlantic Underground podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
No, it's fantastic. It's great to see you. Now, Follow the Silenced is now officially out there. The trailer's incredible. I know you discussed a minute ago that there's a new trailer coming out. Let's first take a look at that now so people can see this new trailer. It's something incredible.
Maddie?
The first question was, why isn't the United States looking in our own backyard for our data?
Madeline. Hey, honey, it's Daddy.
But they were. They just weren't telling us what it said.
Maddie? 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 Hey, welcome back.
I need to take this out. Help. I need this out. I can't do it.
Most of you have never heard of me.
I did my part. I got it.
And most likely have never heard of most of us here.
I'm scared and sad and hurting too. I am you, and I just want someone to help me too. Thank you, guys.
I would like to introduce, I'm proud to introduce, Miss Brianne Dressen.
I don't know where to go. Her cause of death, her actual cause of death is not on this thing.
Thanks for returning my call.
And I did not want to be the one
to
give
give
my
months
mother
and I'm still burning.
stomach issues.
Every single day.
The worst part was I could not walk. I couldn't move my arms or legs.
I couldn't walk, I couldn't move.
Shaking
I couldn't
uncontrollably.
think about moving my legs.
I can't feel my legs. I can't feel anything.
They're not calling the FDA, they're calling us.
You know, I don't want to die. I want to still live for my kids.
Blood clot in his internal jugular vein.
Next week is his birthday. You know what I'm going to celebrate his birthday at?
Why it is the responsibility of sick people to do this is beyond me. I participated in the clinical trial for AstraZeneca.
She participated in the Pfizer COVID vaccine trial.
They dropped me from the trial.
35 adverse events. Reduced to functional abdominal pain. It's a stomach ache. I wonder what else was hidden.
The truth is not out there. And it's thanks to these guys. They've done everything they can to hide people, to hide injustices, and to even literally hide the cries of those people that are suffering.
If we try to talk about it on social media, you get banned. People don't know we even exist.
Denise Hertz is on an email string with the heads of the NIH.
These are safe and effective products.
The CDC.
There is no bad time to get your second shot.
The heads of the FDA.
We have very good safety surveillance systems in place.
If you look at VAERS database, there are more than 1,000 neurological side effects already reported.
None of us are denying that there's potential vaccine injury here.
We already have 1,200 people who've died.
And that's in about 2 months of availability.
For these mRNA vaccines, there is incredible BS out there about thousands of people dying, etc. That just ain't true.
This stack of patients are patients that are stuck.
There were 50 to 100 reports going missing. And I mean, VAERS IDs being disappeared.
If they put down that it was a vaccine injury, they actually won't get reimbursed, so it gets labeled as anxiety.
Diagnosed with vertigo, severe panic attack.
Functional neurologic disorder.
Factitious disorder. So basically, she was making it up.
I was muffled, I was told I was wrong, I was told to go home, and I was told not to talk.
These are human lives. They're just going to stay in limbo forever.
There was a whistleblower early on, Brooke Jackson, last year.
I contacted the FDA and submitted a formal complaint.
They're unblinding patients.
How many studies do you run where you take the placebo group and give them vaccine too? I threatened to go public
no matter what the consequence was.
The government killed my baby. I'm not going to stop this fight.
I told my family that I was going to end my life. I got to look at my son and tell him, honey, I'm going to be okay. But in my heart, I don't know if I'm going to be okay. I don't know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be in a wheelchair the rest of my life.
It broke my son to hear that his mom wanted to die because she had gotten a COVID vaccine.
These are human stories. These aren't people with political agendas.
If I was an anti-vaxxer, I wouldn't have been standing in the freaking line to get the shot.
I just want my daughter back.
So this story has everything to be interesting, right? You've got scandal.
FEMA had offered me money if I changed my son's death certificate from enlarged heart to COVID.
You've got secrets.
The FDA wanted 75 years to release this data.
And what the FDA did to me was contact Pfizer and get me fired.
We don't have any secrets here.
You've got money.
A patent for the Moderna vaccine is owned by the Department of Health and Human Services.
And power.
This is not about freedom or personal choice.
At the base of this story, the very center of this story is love.
I won't sleep until this war is done.
Because without validation, without love, without acceptance, healing cannot happen.
We can't give up.
Let's get you some of your life back, okay?
And we can't give in.
I know that I'm on the other side of the country, but I promise you, you're not alone. So that's what this story is about. It's about love. I'm not going to give up. And I'm not going to give up on these people.
Is this the most powerful thing that you've done so far?
Well, it's certainly way up there. The film's not out yet. I want to make that clear. We're premiering the film this Saturday, so 2 days from the recording of this podcast in Los Angeles and West Hollywood, right in the belly of the beast at the Directors Guild of America. So that's a real evidence of the tide turning. But this film, on an emotional level, is the most powerful film that we've done. A lot of the pandemic series was really about the overtaking of our nation and the truth about the different ideologies that are seeping in to really kill critical thinking. But this film is about the interpersonal experiences that the people who were the first to line up for the trials, for the COVID vaccine trials, they followed, as I say, they followed the science right to the edge of death. And immediately after their shots, they were injured severely. We've been following these people for 4 years on their healing journey. Some of them are still in wheelchairs. Some of them still can't breathe fully on their own. They've been devastated by this experimental toxin that they allowed into their bloodstream. Yeah. But it's really an examination of also what pulls us into bypassing our natural intelligence to make a decision like that can harm our health. And it's also about censorship. It's these people, the reason we call it follow the silenced, obviously, is that they followed the science and then they were silenced. The moment they came out to say, uh-oh, something bad happened and I need help, the scientific industry and the media, big media said, you're crazy, don't listen to these people, ban them, shut down all of their social media and didn't want any of the world to listen to them. So this film is to give them a voice.
Yeah. And the thing is, there's very few, there's people out there as well that died. They don't even have this voice anymore. So these people are speaking as well for those who are no longer with us. Now, let's talk about your early years. Tell us how you ended up in the film industry and where the drive came for you to create the Plandemic series.
Well, it's a good question. It actually happened in 2001. I was in New York to work out a distribution deal for my very first movie, 2001. And that's when the World Trade Center was attacked. And I happened to be very near the scene. And I went down to the World Trade Center and did search and rescue and body recovery for 3 days.
Right.
And as you can imagine, saw a lot and enough to kind of shake me out of this trap that I had fallen into, that Hollywood lured me into, of being very self-centered and how to build a career and and money and power, and the system just does that to you. Even if that's not your intention for getting in there, sooner or later, just from being in that current, you kind of go with the flow of the river. And I didn't even know that I had fallen into that, and suddenly this experience had me see the fragility of life. How within an instant these two monolithic, iconic structures were dust. All the finest automobiles that man knows lined up on Wall Street are being crushed by rescue vehicles so they could get into the scene. None of that mattered anymore.
Yeah.
And all that really mattered was the potential to save a human life. And when I saw that, when I saw people kind of come out from behind their facades, charged with something so much greater than they'd ever experienced, and it was almost like people just kind of realigned with their purpose. In an instant, it didn't matter what color they were, how old they were, what sex they were. No, none of that mattered. It was just, we are here, we are cells in the organism of life, and we're going to help our brothers and sisters. And witnessing that really changed me. And so, in a flash, I suddenly could see Hollywood for what it was. I wanted nothing to do with it. I came home, put everything I had in storage. I was married to someone else at the time. I've now been with my wife for 22 years. But I filed for divorce. I went to live on a friend's vineyard in Napa Valley just to kind of get to know myself, because I'd lost myself.
Yeah.
And get to kind of reconnect with what truly inspired me as an artist, and to reinvigorate that spark I had as a child when I knew that I came here to do something that mattered. Yeah. Which we all have that inciting, inspiration at some point in our life, which is one of the reasons it's so common that we tie a sheet around our neck and try to jump off a bed, because we go, I'm here to do something super. And so it took me a while to just really, it was a scary time for me, to be honest with you, because I thought I was done, and all I really know is creativity. That's all I've ever done. From sketching to building to, everything that I've done. I was a painter, and then to music, and then movies. And so I thought, wow, I don't know that I'm good enough at any of the other arts to jump into those. And filmmaking was really my passion, but I think I'm done.
Yeah.
Because there's no playing field for me. I love the game, but no one wants to play the way I want to play, which is, I think a healthier game.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while to kind of get clear on what I wanted to do, and I took a big chance. I met the love of my life, and then we developed something called Elevate Film Festival together, which was a global filmmaking competition. And we'd put the challenges out to filmmakers in 11 different countries to make a 7 to 11 minute film that spotlighted what was right with where they lived. Because all the media wants to show us is what's wrong with humanity. Yeah. So this was kind of a way to say, let's train our powerful attention to look for the local heroes and the good stuff that's happening, because there's a lot more of that than the bad stuff.
Yeah.
But if your only window to the world is a digital screen, all you see is negativity, and it makes humans look really bad. And so we did this filmmaking competition, and it just caught fire. People were jumping in, A-listers from major movies, and coming off their studio jobs to play for free with us, because it was reminding them of why they got into the business, and that it wasn't just about commerce and selling products that you don't believe in. And so it was very inspiring to me, because I saw all these filmmakers, and it was amazing, because I thought, here I am, this little nobody filmmaker, but I have these major names wanting to come in as judges and participate, and I thought, I'm not alone. That's really what I was left with. I'm not alone. This is most of Hollywood. Hollywood is feeling this way. They want out, and so that was inspiring. And then we did that tour for 3 years, and that became the largest single screen event in the world. I don't think anyone will ever break it, because we were doing screenings for like crowds of 6,000.
Wow!
And that's a big audience to watch a movie with. And then that turned into Elevate Films, the production company that is now my company that I make my movies through.
Incredible. Now, with your experience with 9/11, would you ever do a deep dive documentary into that?
I absolutely would. Yeah, I've been tracking that for years, because I'm one of those crazy conspiracy theorists who believe that it was an inside job.
Yeah, funny old
and you know, and it's pretty obvious by now. As a matter of fact, I just saw a new video today circulating online of Building 7 is the big question, right? Because the whole, you know, the other towers, you know, people have that argument all day with, you know, jet fuel and the heat of jet fuel and all that. But it's like, okay, fine. Airplanes hit those buildings and they collapsed. First two still fabricated buildings ever to implode within their own footprint. Interesting, they both happen on the same day, first time ever. And then this third building that I actually was in hours before it fell, because we were looking for people doing search and rescue, which oddly, it was the only building. I didn't even know what Building 7 was. When we were there and we heard that it fell, I didn't even know what it was. But I reflected back, and I remember we were out on the rubble at one point, and somebody goes, "Oh, National Guard's here." And we look over, and there's a person in full camo, gear, and he's got a automatic weapon standing at the door of this building. It turns out that was Building 7, but that was the only door that this person was guarding. And it didn't hit me till later. I realized that was Building 7. Interesting that was the only building that they had somebody guarding that way. Yeah. And so here we are. It was back then. I think it was outlandish to consider that the U.S. government, in conjunction with other foreign allies, adversaries maybe, that they would orchestrate something, that there's dark forces within the government, not the full government, but this thing they call the shadow government or the deep state, whatever you want to call it, that there are forces this dark and this evil and this wicked that they would do this. Well, all through history this has been done. It's called it's a false flag routine. And if you look at, USS Liberty and the Gulf of Tonkin and all the different events that catalyzed the excuse to wage war, then it starts to make sense that actually there are factions within our government that would do something like this. And so that was a huge wake up for me. I left there knowing that something was fishy. It didn't feel right. And lo and behold, now that COVID has happened, it's truly the Great Awakening where people now realize, wow, there are forces this dark and wicked. So let's look backwards now at the stuff that we denied 20 some years ago and start to figure that out. And so I really support the idea that, Trump has mentioned a few times wanting to investigate that, and I sure hope he does.
Yeah, absolutely. And a history of false flags would be an interesting one to do as well. You mentioned the Gulf of Tonkin incident there. Do you know who the admiral was who actually called in the false flag and said that they were under attack?
Who?
It was Jim Morrison's dad. Jim Morrison out the doors. His dad was the admiral.
Really?
Yeah. And then that leads us into a whole thing of people that were involved with the military that become pop stars, but that's a whole other story.
Well, I've not heard this one first, but there's this ancestral, oftentimes, weaving of nepotism through all these characters. When you really get down to it, a lot of these theories that I used to hear years ago, because I've actually been I get called a conspiracy theorist, but it's been one of my pet peeves for a long time. I don't like when people just jump all into, the wildest assumptions immediately, because I think it does true truth-seeking damage. Yeah. But lo and behold, we're running out of conspiracy theories because they're all coming true.
I know, that's what's quite funny. Now, love wins has been a recurring theme and the ultimate truth. If people can awaken to this, is it game over for the evil in the world?
It truly is. And let's talk about love a little bit, because I talk about love a lot. And I think that we've been, like anything that truly has power, it gets, through, by design, it gets diminished in our minds. Like we think, oh, kumbaya, love, everything is love. That's what the hippies said. Look how that worked for them. And that's all by design, because love is the most powerful force ever. You think nuclear energy is powerful? It's love that they really fear. And why is that? Because love connects us with God. Love connects us with nature. Love connects us with our natural intelligence. Love connects us with each other. And it's 2,600 years ago, the words were spoken that united we stand, divided we fall.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most potent and powerful sentences to ever be spoken, because we have to realize that when we, if you understand life kind of from the micro to the macro, within our bodies we have cells, and when those cells are at war with each other, we have disease. When we have disease, the organism is unhealthy and the organism isn't fully alive.
No.
And when we, the cells, the people, the cells of this organism called life are fighting, are divided, then we are weak and we are unable to do our most powerful work, and our lifespan is shortened. And so at the root of all of this countering force is what love is. It's a countering force, because we live in a universe that's it's a polarity of dark and light, and we need it. Scientifically, they call this the third dimension that we live in. Mm-hmm. And if you understand 3D art, what gives it, what makes it three-dimensional art, what makes the image jump off the page and look real, is shadow. And so shadow is necessary in the third dimensional realm. It's necessary. So we never want to get rid of the shadow. We always will have that contrast, because that's how we, in this dualistic experience, that's how we can, it's why we invented time, right? We kind of have to measure, and we need examples to be able to, to know what is darkness. Well, we know that because we know what light is. Yeah. What is pleasure, because we know what pain is. And so there's always this opposite. But the problem is that the pain, the darkness, it is always trying to take over the entire image. So if you think of this as a 3D image, art image, well, if the shadow were to overtake the image, then you have nothing but a black page, nothing but blackness.
Yeah.
There's nothing there to move you. There's nothing there to learn from. And so when the darkness intensifies, all that is a calling for us to shine brighter, because we are the light. Just like in God's image, we are the light. Yeah. And so the brighter we shine, the more contrast we get. And that is the evolution of our lives, right? We just become, it vibrates at a higher oscillation, the more contrast we have. And that is the evolution of consciousness. So it's a wave that we ride, a wave of frequency that gets constantly tuned to a higher frequency until we're finally at this harmonic state with the universe and God itself. And I think that's what when we see people striving for enlightenment or whatever, I think that's what that means. And I don't know that there's ever a there to get to. I want to make that clear. Yeah. But it's a process of discovery that makes life worth living. It's the hero's journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to where we just mentioned about conspiracy theory and the way that we get labeled. Let's talk about what Wikipedia has on you. Wikipedia says Plandemic is a trilogy of conspiracy theory films produced by Mikki Willis, and this is where it gets funny, promoting misinformation about the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, is there not enough proof now from the Plandemic series? As we've said, everything that we've put forward has come true and been proven. But is there enough evidence now to get Wikipedia to actually change this statement? Or is this an entity of its own, just as a smear campaign against anything that goes against their official narratives?
Well, a lot of people still don't know how Wikipedia works. So Wikipedia is something that you can go in and edit. And unless you're someone like me, and they lock it, so you can't change it. And so if they want that narrative to stay alive about someone like me, someone who takes a chance to tell the truth in the world, then they lock it, and I can't go in and change it, and no one else can go in and change it. And so they're controlling the narrative. And it's interesting that they, build up this platform as kind of a open source, free platform where we can go in, and as people evolve, we can change their bios and update their latest book or whatever it might be. And then there's some people, they go, nope, you're going to stick with that rumor for the rest of your life, because if anyone looks you up, we want them, we know that's where they're going to go to find out who you are, and we want that to be their first impression. And so it's just a game, but people are onto it right now. I go to Wikipedia when I'm researching someone just to find out the basic information, which is typically true. Where did they go to school? Where did they study? What kind of credentials do they have? Just dates and stuff like that. But I don't get I don't listen to any of the opinion of it.
Yeah, no, it is. It's, typical mainstream narrative. And, I just let it go by me now and just ignore it and laugh at it, because that's all it really deserves. Now, Plandemic the musical was surprisingly incredible. I wasn't sure what to expect with it, but for me, it's the hidden messages, and they are something that you won't catch first time around. But I believe you actually launched a competition for people to find what you call Easter eggs in Plandemic the musical, because they were deliberately planted. What gave you the idea for this? And can you tell us more about how you incorporated that into the musical?
So the musical primarily takes place in a grocery store, and hidden all through the grocery store is something that in the film business we call Easter eggs. This has been happening for a long time. So there's a lot of famous movies that the cast and crew will hide things within view, but only they really know it's there. You have to look very carefully. It's kind of a game they play, right? So in Fight Club, they put Starbucks coffee mugs, coffee cups everywhere.
Yeah. And
there's numerous times when someone's drinking it or it's in the background. Is that a product placement? Did they get money for that? Probably. And a lot of times it's funny, right? So they'll have a Star Wars episode where somewhere in the background there'll be a character that hasn't been introduced yet, or someone who died and he's at the bar and they're hidden, just so the diehard fans will go, oh, look at that. That doesn't belong there. And then it also causes, re-engagement, because people will hear about it. Oh, I missed that. Let me go back and watch that moment to try to find those. And so I didn't invent this. It was just something that I've always really liked. The first time I actually discovered this was I was on the set. I was very young, and I was an extra on a movie set. It came into my hometown. I was born and raised in Sacramento. And a movie came through, and I was intrigued by movies, so I went and signed up to be an extra. And we were in a restaurant, and there was a scene where 4 extras are I'm at a table with 3 other extras and a bunch of people, and someone from the crew came over and put a dog biscuit on the table.
Okay.
And a little dog bone, chewy bone, and I saw that, and I thought, that's weird. And then, but by the time they were ready to roll, I took it and I hid it, because I thought, well, he forgot that there, and he came over, no, and he put it back, and I was like, what is that about? What is this guy doing with a dog bone? And they had a whole inside joke with the cast and crew. So later I was like, what was the deal with the dog bone, the little chewy thing? And they said, oh, that's called an Easter egg. That's the crew just playing jokes on each other. Oh, that was interesting. And so we did that in the supermarket, but we wanted people to look deeper and think deeper. And so we put a lot of Easter eggs that are relevant, Easter eggs to have people understand the frequency of music.
Yeah.
Because years ago, our music has been tuned away from harmonious frequencies into more chaotic, dissonant frequencies that actually cause us to be more, aggro, more, less connected with ourselves and each other. And then there are harmonious frequencies that do the opposite, that literally bring us into a harmonic state, a holistic state with each other. And so all the music in Plandemic 4, the musical, I guess it's number 4, yeah, that's right, is tuned to these frequencies. Our musical director, my composer, Deepak, who's a musical genius, very, very keyed into frequency and how it works. You start to understand that, everything vibrates. We live in an electromagnetic vibrational planet. And as Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, start thinking in terms of sound, vibration, and frequency. Yeah. And, the Earth itself, it's called the Schumann resonance. It has a very particular frequency that it vibrates on. And if we are we've all heard what it sounds like when someone's out of key when they sing. And so if we're living out of key, out of harmony with nature itself, which for the most part we are, because a lot of the digital addictions that we have, become dependent upon, some of them vibrate at a dissonant frequency, and we become entrained and tuned to our digital realm, which is why it's so important for us to spend more time in nature, take our shoes off, feel the bare earth under our feet, to be silent, be still, if you want to call it meditation, cool. But to really tune in, to understand that there's a really divine system right outside our window that's operating really well. And if we pay more attention to that and live more by that code, our lives will be more harmonious, more loving, and you know, just more satisfying. And that's really what we're always hoping to achieve with the movies that we put out there. There's always a little bit, even when it's hardcore politics and let's expose the truth, my movies typically end with a message to remind us to return to our natural way of being.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Follow the Silence really has the potential now to show people what lengths the establishment will go to in order to cover up and hide those vaccine injuries and deaths. Is this going to be something that you see as a turning point for people to say, okay, now we're going to recognize it? Over the past 5 years, the amount of people that don't want to speak to me, whether it's family, whether it's friends, most of them have been in the nursing side of things, or doctors, or people who have a firm, rigid belief within the medical establishment that they can do no wrong. Is this something now that is going to be able to awaken those people to kind of look at it and say, okay, we see now that there is a problem? Because with all this censorship stopping these people speaking out and having their own stories heard, to get this out there now is a really big thing, isn't it?
It certainly is. And to answer your question, yes, this is the film that will end the debate. Anyone who sees this film and still buys into the mainstream narrative is trying very hard not to wake up. Then there's personal reasons for that. And those are the people that we just have to let be. They have their own reasons. It might be shame because they forced their child to get vaccinated. They don't want to face the fact that they may have endangered their child. That's a very tough thing for parents to face. They may have been so arrogant in the world and their ego is so thick that they can never back off. They've dug in too deep and have shamed and smeared so many people, including loved ones in their own family, that for them to see the truth, it would be too painful and too ego-shattering. And then there's the people who found meaning in COVID. They were told, you know, they were led into a meaningless life and then were told that if you just put on a mask, you get to be the righteous ones, you get to be the grandma savers, you get to be the pro-science people and defend the world against all these anti-vax criminals. And so they found meaning in it. They don't want to take off their mask. They don't want it to end because finally their little mundane life feels better to them. And so even if it's false, even if it's built upon lies and they're bonded by agreement, which will, you know, force them to continue to agree. And that's the trap of collectivism. It forces you to continue to agree, but the agreements, the requests continue to expand and continue to drift further and further and further away from reality, right? Suddenly men can have babies and you have to agree with that. Otherwise you're completely out of the tribe, right? And so what happens is it's all part of the mind control program. And the further they push these ideologies, there's people that will hang on till the very, very end. And I mean their end, because it will not end well for them. Because they'll move so far out of reality that they will become mentally ill. And all of us are seeing those people and facing them every single day on social media. They're not well. You know, they literally will repeat everything the mainstream says, everything their political leaders say. It doesn't have to make sense. To them, they're fighting hard for the right for a man who calls himself a woman to beat the skulls in the boxing ring of women. Yes. You know, so we have women fighting to be abused, fighting for the right to be abused. Yeah. And this is when you just go, wow. I mean, that's how and they're not stupid people. No. That's the mistake, is to consider them stupid. A lot of these people, matter of fact, I've learned some of the most infected people are highly intelligent. Yes. Because these mind control programs were built for like university professors.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's built for people who have influence, and it's very rare that someone with a low IQ has much influence, unless you watch The View. And so it's built for that level of intelligence, so they could trick the doctors, the scientists, the college professors, the leaders of nations. And so it's not that they're stupid. Typically it's because they've been trained in government institutions. And they didn't know all that 12 years of studying was indoctrination into a way of thinking that they're trapped in now.
And that's it. You think of how many people lived a life from cradle to grave, just following the program and never even knowing that they've been programmed right the way through. And as you say, with the more education, the more people get into doing these degrees and taking all these education things, they're being trained to repeat what is put in front of them. So when something like this comes along, they're already trained to repeat what's been put in front of them, and they're going to parrot exactly what it is. But unfortunately, society holds these kind of people in high regard. The white coat syndrome that comes with the doctors, where if the doctor tells me it's this, it must be true. He wouldn't lie to me. He has my best interest at heart. And unfortunately, this is the way society views these people. And we need something now that's a game changer, and I really hope that now Follow the Silence, there's going to be something that's going to do that. Now let's talk about Judy Mikovits. She really points the finger at Anthony Fauci for the crimes he has committed. Robert F. Kennedy has written a book about him exposing his corruption and lies. His pardon by Biden's hand is very telling in itself. What's your opinion on Fauci? Does he fully believe his own lies, or is he just pure evil? And how has he not been arrested yet by the current White House administration?
Well, both. I think that he's got a lot of darkness in him, and he's also fooled by a lot of the rhetoric himself.
Mm-hmm.
We have to keep in mind, Anthony Fauci is a scapegoat.
Oh yeah,
he's just a puppet of the system, and so his real downfall is greed. He's been making a lot of money, and he's also been put in a position of power, so it feeds his ego. So that he's this little man, probably didn't have a lot of power in his life, probably got pushed around and bullied. So now he's in a position where he can control a lot of people. But the arrest of Anthony Fauci, which may happen, they may throw him under the bus and really use him to say, yeah, he really did that. He was wrong. So it's not us. He was leading this whole thing, and we were following his advice, and he really got it wrong, and he needs to be held accountable. And we need better leadership so we can really, do the work we came here to do, which is to save lives. And that's the trick. And they might do that just to get us to think that justice has been served. And, it should be done. I think Anthony Fauci should actually be held accountable. But let's not take our eyes off he was as much in charge as Biden was.
Yeah.
Now it's coming out that most of everything Biden signed, his signature, was auto-signed. What president uses an auto sign? That was so that other people could make the decision for him, which that came out several times. There were things that reporters, that's why they really hated random questions from reporters. He always had a list, and he would say, okay, who am I supposed to call on next? Okay, so-and-so from NBC, because they had it set up. They didn't want him randomly saying anybody, okay, you go next, because they would ask him questions. And there were a couple of times that they asked him questions about something he signed, and he was like, what? Like, what? And he would give another answer, and people were like, does he not know he signed that? They thought it was just his mental, his mind escaping him. But no, it was the fact that he didn't even know it got signed, and he wasn't supposed to know that. And so he's propped up. Jill was doing more. She was more of the president than he was. Yeah. And so we have to keep in mind that there's a lot of the people that we actually see their faces. And they're either, really captured by the system themselves, just like our woke friends, right? Our woke friends who say men can get pregnant. They're also captured by a system, and they live in a bubble, And they don't understand it sometimes when they come out and say, you should get your third or fourth booster. And then they go, why so much negativity? Wow, it must be all these evil right-wingers who just keep, twisting the narrative. They live in such a bubble that they don't know that there's validity to what the people are saying. And so you can see sometimes when they get confronted, they go to a public event and they get confronted and they're kind of like, what? Why am I so hated? What's happening? They have no idea. They're out of touch with the people, and that's by design.
Yeah.
They push these people up front so the real wizards in the background, behind the curtain, can continue to pull the levers.
That's it. I mean, there's always been the whisperers there. You always used to see the likes of Zbigniew Brzezinski and many others in the ears of the presidents in the past that people don't realize, and this is what always amazes me. And again, like you said about people shouting things, I mean, you look at Justin Trudeau and then people are just verbally abusing him and he's still smiling and waving, probably can't understand what's going on.
I know.
But at the end of the day, these are purposeful in their design. Every president and prime minister and politician that are out there, they're there as a buffer. They're there to take that vented anger and disdain for what's going on from the public. But the public will never generally see any further than these people. And these people are there purposely as a buffer to stop anybody looking any higher than them. Do you think at some point we're going to see the exposure of the real puppet masters, those who pull the strings, those that fund the campaigns of these presidents and prime ministers, those that have these people that are seen as influential in their pockets? Will they be exposed one day?
One day, potentially. Within our lifetime, probably not.
Yeah.
And, we don't even know the names of the people that are truly pulling the strings.
Mm-hmm.
But we're getting closer and closer to understanding that there are certain groups of people that can't even be discussed. And that's why they've always said, if you want to know who really controls things, just find those that you cannot criticize.
Yes.
And so we're starting to learn as people get closer and closer, because that's what's happening. It's kind of like that old, game we'd play as kids, where it's like getting warmer, colder. It's like we've been playing that game and looking under all the rocks and going, and then feeling like we're getting warmer. We know that because now we know the indicators. We know that the moment they jump out and start smearing you for even daring to look there, and all the news stations are saying the same thing, we go, I hear you're getting warmer. So keep looking where they're telling you not to look, especially when they have a big reaction. If they tell you to look there, if they come out in support of you and go, oh, this is great, they're uncovering something, then you go, getting colder.
Yeah.
Let's move in another direction. No, you were doing really good over there. Stay there, please. And so people are starting to get smarter to understand the game and how it works. And so we will, within our lifetime, I think there's going to be some major shocks coming out as it's already happening right now, that Doge is uncovering corruption with all these institutions that are just, laundering billions of dollars of our money. And then we wonder why we have such debt. Yeah. And while, national debt, but then independent debt, most Americans are under some form of debt. And that debt is crushing. And that debt is what Jesus was saying, we can't do this. Mm-hmm. This will not leave our people free. Yeah. And lo and behold, he was right. Here we are with all these people in such debt, whether it's college debt or credit card debt or mortgage debt or whatever it is, we are in debt to the central banking system. Yeah. And we're paying on the minimum payments that it doesn't reduce the debt. And it never leaves us in ownership of what we think we're buying.
Yeah.
And they say you will own nothing and be happy. Well, part of that statement is true. You will own nothing. I don't know how happy we're going to be, but that's the goal. Because when we own our land, when we're not enslaved to a system, then we're sovereign. Yes. Then we also have something to fight for. Years ago, I get fascinated in bizarre subjects. And so years ago, the question came up is, what makes a ghetto a ghetto? And I thought, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What, I never thought about that before. Like, what makes a certain area? Now, a bigot will look at it and just go, well, what's the demographic of the people? Oh, they're brown and black. Well, then it's just they're low-class people. Okay, well, I don't think so. Let's look a little bit deeper on that. And so you start to understand that it's a crafted situation that leaves people in low-income areas enslaved. They get on the welfare program like I was raised on, and so now they have to adhere to whatever the state says, because otherwise they'll cut you off, and now you are dependent upon state money, and you own nothing. And so a big part of why low-income areas look the way they do is because when you don't own something, I don't know about you, and I hate to admit this, I'm sorry, Avis and Hertz, but when I rent your cars, I don't drive them the way I drive my cars. I don't care for them the same way because they're not my car.
Yeah.
And if I hit a curb, oh well, I'm going to turn it in tomorrow, and it's not, and I hate to admit that, but yeah. I've witnessed that in myself. Like, I'm not as careful with a rental car as I am with my car because I own my car.
Yeah.
And I have to have it for the next 10 plus years. And so that lack of ownership has people go, oh, put a car on jacks in the front yard. Why would you mow your yard? Nobody else is. So it becomes cancerous.
Yeah.
Because you go, everything's graffitied. No one has lawns, and every window's broken and whatever. So why should I go to the effort of, and the person who owns my place, I don't like him because he's the man.
Yeah.
And he comes after me when I'm late on my money. And I don't like being shamed that way. I don't like to be reminded that I'm not doing well financially. And so I'm going to punch holes in this guy's wall in my own kind of unconscious way to get back at him. And so that is what creates a third world country ultimately. And so the more we strip the sovereignty away from the people, the ownership away from the people, that's why Bill Gates and BlackRock, they're buying up all the farmland and all the single family homes. Because they want us to rent. They don't want us to own anything for that reason, because then we will eventually come to a place where we will have to take the government's money, and then we are enslaved.
Yeah. And that's it. And
more than we are.
The way it's going, because at the end of the day, with the introduction and the power that AI can have, and the way that we think we're going to end up moving out of the current financial system into a digital currency, everything is screaming out absolute enslavement, that the way we're going. And to the point where, very similar to the way that the Chinese social credit scoring system works, that nobody will be able to sneeze, comment, say anything without the scrutiny of the government. And unfortunately, if we do end up on this tokenized system, where not only we will become assets in the stock market, but every single thing that we own will be rented back in a you will own nothing and be happy scenario. But the moment you don't comply, and the moment you don't want to speak out favorably against the government that are overreaching around you, then they'll just cut you off. They'll just make sure you don't have money, you don't have food, you're publicly shamed. And this is where we're heading, and I don't think many people realize that this is the future if we don't stop it now. But putting your head in the sand and ignoring it is not the way to do it.
Have you seen Pandemic 3, The Great Awakening?
Yes.
So that's, that we cover a lot of that, right? We compare what's happening in China to what's happening in the U.S., and we show that we're on the pathway towards that. And we go back historically to Mao Zedong, to really examine how they started that cultural revolution that corralled 1.4 billion very intelligent people. Chinese people are very disciplined and, for the most part, very educated people into a system that is essentially an open-air prison. Now, there's a lot of Americans that'll be like, China's doing it way better than us, and they have good health care, and they don't understand that, and they hear it from Chinese people, and there's some really good elements to China. I mean, there's some ways that they're so far advanced as fast as they can build an entire city. And there are certain things that they do that are far superior to the US without a doubt. But it just depends on what you value. If you value freedom over all of that, then China is not the place for you. If you like to be told what to do and to stay within your lane and know that all your neighbors are watching you, and that if you jaywalk, that you might get a lower social credit score, and that eventually if you do it too many times, you might get an eviction notice on your apartment. If you're okay with that, it does force people to behave a certain way. So there's an element of it that I can see why it's attractive to some people, because they're just tired of the chaos. They're tired of the belligerent, behavior of our youth taking over, intersections, and the cops aren't unable to do anything, and going into stores and smashing and grabbing whatever they want, jewelry, and the owners of the stores can't do anything because they'll be imprisoned if they do. People are tired of that, so they see this kind of totalitarian regime structure, and they go, it kind of looks attractive at one point. We don't mind having a dictator as long as things are in order like this, so that we can walk in the park again. Because violators get punished by death, or, like in Philippines, when Duarte came in, it was like, you steal, I cut off your hands. You rape, I cut off something else, and crime dropped, dramatically. And so people look at that and they go, well, we could use a little bit of that here. And I think we have a little bit of that here right now. I think we have, and Trump gets a lot of flack about it. And there are moves he's making that I don't like right now. But I knew that coming in. I set my expectations for being really happy and really upset. And that's just the way it goes. But there are some things that you have to dig deeper to understand. I had a big reaction to this Palestinian protester being detained and possibly deported because I'm a free speech advocate. And I thought, well, look, whatever he's protesting, I don't have to agree with it. I might even hate it. I didn't like the Black Lives Matter protests because I knew who funded them. I knew what it was really about, and I knew that it would do great damage to the Black community, but I didn't want them to be imprisoned as a result of that. In the same way, I didn't want the January 6 people to be imprisoned. So when I first heard the headline that, someone organized a peaceful protest pro-Palestinian, and he's Palestinian, fighting for his homeland, and now Trump's going to deport him, well, that's horrible. Oops, I didn't dig deep enough. Because once I did, I went, oh, wow. Okay, he represents a group that wants to abolish Western civilization as it's known. There's issues there that you go, oh, okay. And he's a green card holder, and there are specific rules under that. I just approached him like he's a citizen that has the rights I have. I didn't realize he's a visitor that has different rights. If I go to another country, I have to adhere to my temporary the agreement that allows me to be there on a temporary basis. And I can't be in the streets cursing against another nation without the expectation that they're going to say, get out. And so all these things require a little bit more, research and understanding. But above all, that's what pulls us into a structure like China, is when things get bad enough, then we'll accept the most insane limitations of our civil liberties and our human rights, if the promise is, and that's how they used COVID, right? It's like, look, we're going to go back to normal, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, wear a mask, don't stand don't stand too close to people, all of this is going to go away, and then you can have your life back. Well, Follow the Silenced is about those people that bought into that. I, thankfully, because I knew Anthony Fauci's history, people always ask me, how were you so quick? May 4th of 2020, you must have started on that movie immediately. And I said, I did, immediately. The moment I saw Anthony Fauci resurface, my brother was killed by AZT, which was at the hands of Anthony Fauci in the 80s and 90s, which killed hundreds of thousands of innocent gay people because he said it was the solution to HIV.
And funnily enough, he said it was safe and effective as well.
The reason that only one drug has been made available, AZT, because it's the only drug that has been shown to be safe and effective.
Totally, yeah. And so knowing his history, the moment I saw him resurface, I went into action. And so, but there are still people who refuse to see it. And And those are the people that will vote for a structure like China has, where all of our neighbor, I mean, look, they did it during COVID, right? It's like, you know, your parents told you never to tattle, but we're telling you it's the opposite here. We want you to tattle, and you get rewarded. What do they say? It once was snitches get stitches, but now snitches get rewarded. Yeah. And so they were trying to create that system that, you know, now we would start turning in our family members. They weren't wearing a mask. You know, they stood too close to me. They, whatever it is, they said something in a private dinner negative about, like, there were people within the home of the brave and the land of the free that literally were for that. Yeah. And that's where we start to go, all right, that's where humanity gets dangerous. And we have to start thinking for ourselves. And that's why Pandemic 3, The Great Awakening, was about collectivism. Because at the root of it, I thought, you know, what causes this? Like, are we just insane? Well, no, but there is this predictable pattern that we will follow if our lives lack meaning. It all Carl Jung would say, the problem with our world is the lack of meaning. If our lives are meaningless and we're detached from a purpose that we know is in service to all of life, if we're detached from God, if we don't have true love in our lives, true connectedness, if we don't have a family, or our family is at odds, then suddenly, you know, these government officials come along and say, we'll give you a family. I used to work with gangs exactly the same way. I used to work with young men in South Central Los Angeles. And when I would ask them, you know, like, you know what you're doing is dangerous, and you know that your lifespan is probably going to be 20 years old. Mm-hmm. Why do you do this? And it always came down to they had no father in the house, and they didn't feel safe, and they needed to be connected with a tribe. Even if that tribe was doing horrible things, they needed to feel the safety and the security of being part of a collective, even if they know that very collective would end their lives at any moment if they stepped out of line. Yeah. But it was better to be part of that than to be kind of solo and vulnerable and dangerous to being a victim of the gang. And so this is all gang mentality, you know. And today we're still the Bloods and the Crips. Yeah. You know, ironic, the Bloods and the Crips were, one was blue and one was red, and now we got Republicans and Democrats. It's all a gang war.
Yeah, it's all that divide and conquer that they've been playing for centuries. You mentioned Jesus before, and I thought it would be amusing. The funny things pop in my mind when we're talking, and we're talking about censorship, we're talking about everything going on. And I don't know why it popped in my head. It'd be really amusing to do something where Jesus comes back, the second coming of Christ, and he tries to fit into society and start talking about things, and because there's no way Jesus could come back now and not be censored. They'd shut him down. They'd do everything to stop him, you know, exposing the banks, exposing everything that's going on, even trying to heal people in a natural way. You know, he would be the ultimate rebel, but society in this day and age would shut him down. He would never become the man that he was in, you know, centuries gone by. Now, one thing we wanted to talk about as well, do you think that the doctors, the nurses, the medical staff, pharmaceutical representatives and companies will now panic if they see follow the silence? Because it really puts the spotlight on their sheer incompetence. And I really do think it's going to cause ripples and waves throughout establishments, as we said earlier, to the point where most of them are just not going to want to watch it because it's going to bring so many truths home, and they're going to realize what they've done. Can you see this having that kind of effect? And do we see them just ignoring it and not wanting to see it? Or could it actually be the turning point where people say, okay, I'm going to be responsible here. I was unaware. Now I've seen this. I understand. Could this bring a lot of good people forward that done bad things unknowingly?
It sure could, and it better. It's what the film is intended to do. I mean, we have Zoom calls with the heads of FDA, multiple Zoom calls with a group called React 19 that formed out of a group of people that were injured and silenced. And they were back and forth to DC dealing with all the policymakers and getting, catching them in lie after lie after lie.
Yeah.
And there are whistleblowers in the movie, high-level whistleblowers that really reveal what's going on behind the scenes. We have all the critical information with top doctors of really proving the damage that this thing has done. And so it absolutely has the potential to open the Pandora's box. And so there are a lot of people that are going to see this that are either going to be broadsided by it in the medical industry by realizing what was really going on and what they were truly in service to. And there are going to be those that are extremely scared because it reveals their crimes.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Hollywood and the movie industry has always been seen by those who are aware as a cesspool of evil. Have you had any experiences that shocked you? And are you surprised at how many people within the industry, the influencers that could have spoken out, have actually said nothing?
Of course, yes. It's shocking. It's shocking that there are some people who knew what was going on long before. I understand it though. I try to apply compassion to everything, and it was a lot of people, they built a lifestyle that requires a lot of money to maintain, expensive homes and cars, and they had every right to. They worked really hard. They went to school for a long, long time, and they've been in a profession that actually helps people, so they thought.
Yeah.
And then they are in a position where they're faced with, if I speak out and I lose all income, then I will be in a position really rapidly where I'm going to have to go bankrupt and I lose everything and I don't know what else I'll do. All I've ever studied is this one particular field, and this industry is set up in such a way that there's no alternative way for me to do my work if I can't, without being within the structure of the system. And so I'm done. So the thought of a 40-year-old man that has, worked so hard to get where they are and maybe has 3 children and a wife and all this is support, to think, well, if I speak out, then I don't know if I'm going to be able to feed my kids in a year, and I don't really know what's going to become of my future. And it's a scary, it's a scary idea to consider that it could go in that direction, and it has for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so I understand why some would hesitate and why some would justify, well, there's a lot of people speaking out in my field. Do I need to be another one? It's being said out there. And I dealt with a lot of people behind the scenes, that I will always keep confident because they asked me to. But they'd contact me and I would beg them sometimes, like trust me, speak out. You'll be rewarded in the end. Your life will get better.
Yeah.
It might get hard for a little while, but if you're ever wanting to change your mind, please hit me up and let me know. I would love to see you speak out, but instead they call me confidentially, and they give me information, and then I'll expose it myself, or I'll pass it on to another doctor that can speak scientifically into the circumstance, who's willing to be public about it.
Yeah.
But I've had a lot of those circumstances. I've even met with people that I still don't know their real names. They have an assumed name, and they will speak to me on Signal but no video call, and I'll probably never know their names. They're whistleblowers from high up, and they've provided really great information. You also have to be careful of that when you're a truth teller, because sometimes that's a plant to give you misinformation.
Yes.
And so you have to really dig into that. But so far, all the people who have contacted me anonymously have been honest and real.
Yeah.
And so we've taken their information and we've used it in our movies. But to this day, we have one in Follow the Silence who's in total silhouette, and we replaced her voice with an AI voice because she's concerned, and not just concerned. They're not all just concerned for losing their finances. Some of them are concerned about losing their lives.
Yeah.
Because it happens. We've had almost 100 holistic doctors in the past 20 years die very mysteriously, like with two gunshot wounds to the back of the head. Who kills themselves that way? People that were just about to get married, as happy as can be, who had said they'd never ever commit suicide, and suddenly, you know, they're taking a bottle of pills or whatever. You know, it's like things that just don't add up. And these were people that were early on. I will say this: it's becoming safer and safer and safer. And so, for anyone that might be listening to this that's considered speaking out or that's sitting on valuable information, I don't have the same concerns that I had just a couple of years ago, because the tide is turning, and when there's more of us speaking out, and when the narrative starts to shift, then, and it has already, then it becomes far less dangerous to speak out. When I spoke out May 4th of 2020 about COVID, it was the height of danger, because they were just establishing the narrative, and they were looking very carefully for any naysayers. And they had all their guns loaded, and they were ready to take us down. And so I knew when I hit send, it was May 4th, and I literally said out loud, "May the 4th be with us." And I hit the button because I knew that this could, you know, this could be bad, and that it would definitely change my career, but that, you know, that they could come after us. You know, my friend Alex Jones, he just had one of his employees that was gunned down at midnight in front of his home and killed. This just happened last week. You know, and they said it was likely because he's been speaking out very loudly about Ukraine and doing a lot of research regarding Ukraine, and he was on, and Alex they're on some kind of a Ukrainian hit list. And so this is a real thing. But I'll tell you, this is what's brought a lot of us closer to God, because when there is a connectedness with the source of life, and I often say, by whatever name you choose, I pray to Jesus Christ, because I had a profound experience in 2008 that woke me up to that, that I had resisted my entire life. But that connectedness is what leaves people that I'm working with not motivated, not in a place of fear, because they feel that they're in service to something higher. And I can't explain it to you, but I feel that I'm protected on many dimensions. And so I don't move into what I do with any fear. No. I'm aware of the dangers. And so, you know, I have 18 cameras around my house and have full security, but only just to play it safe because I have children. But as other than that, to myself, what I know is this thing called the ego, this false self, this thing that too many men worship, the identity of who we are. You know, we get caught up in thinking that, you know, that this thing called Miki is important. And on one hand it is, on the other hand it's totally insignificant. And again, that's that dualistic, the mind has a hard time holding that both can be true. You know, I have to respect myself and honor and love myself enough to have morals that what I choose is the highest choice to keep my instrument clear, but to understand that it is an instrument and that what comes through it is God. And the metaphor for this is, when your computer is disconnected from the internet and from Wi-Fi, it is subject to only what's stored on its hard drive, what's stored within the closed circuitry of that computer. That's it. So at a certain point, once it's said everything and done everything, it has to start recycling old information because that's all it has. But once that computer is plugged into the internet, it becomes a supercomputer able to access divine intelligence, infinite intelligence. And the human body is the same way. You know, we can either just work off our closed circuitry of the mind and what we were taught and how we were programmed, or we can get past ourselves and tap in to a greater intelligence and actually learn from ourselves as we're speaking. And I think that's something that we're learning right now. In the future, it's probably going to be something we know how to do we know how to do willingly, and some people do already now, and some of us are just learning how to dance that dance. But what I'm learning is that to be available to that communication does require us to understand that there is a source intelligence that's guiding all of life, and that if we merge with that and listen to that, it's very subtle, so it requires us to slow down the momentum of our mind, particularly the noise in our mind, requires us to be in the frequency of nature more, and then we start to hear the clarity, the guidance that comes through us, and then it becomes easier to make informed decisions about the direction of our lives. And that's where we need to be, because then when these insane ideologies start to become the dominant narrative, we can see through them and for what they are, and we can still stay on our path.
Yeah. I always say to people, if you could just reach up and just connect to your higher self, it'd be the downloads that you would get, the information that you would get. As you say, it's like plugging back into that mainframe computer again. Everything, the infinite knowledge and everything that's there and everything that you were meant to be and everything that you were meant to achieve. You know, unfortunately, the programming that we go through, as we said earlier, from cradle to grave, that programming doesn't matter anymore, because you have a direct connection to the source. You have a direct connection that will give you everything you need. And really, from where you came from, everything you planned before you came here, everything you wanted to achieve and experience when you came here is back with your higher self. And if people can only tap into that, then, and understand that they need to just take everything that they're programmed with and put it aside and then move forward, it's a game changer for everyone. But it's, unfortunately, and I'm not a big fan of religion, because I think religion can be the Pied Piper. I think it can take people off in a direction that never allows them to fully fulfill their true potential. It's like saying, you know, I'll show you this and I'll show you this and I'll show you this. But when it comes to you realizing who you are and finding out who you truly are, then you need me to tell you that. People don't need to be told what to think. People don't need an authority over them. People just need to connect back to themselves and really understand who they truly are. And love, as we said earlier, is probably the key to opening that door. And I really do hope that people find that out there. Now, we mentioned earlier about people that you have the connections with, and I know you've had connections with Robert F. Kennedy in the past. If you could Follow the Silenced into the hands of Robert F. Kennedy and said, make sure that people see this, do you think he would? And does that in itself have the potential to really blow the doors off this? Or is he now in a position where maybe he has his sights on being the next president, and maybe he has to start dialing things back from what he was doing with the Children's Defense League?
Well, he's in the movie. He's in Follow the Silenced.
Right.
So he's a part of it, and absolutely, I'm sure he will be a big advocate for it. But we interviewed him for this movie, and I have as of yesterday, another kind of an emergency project that we're taking on, and so we were, Bobby and I were in communication yesterday. He might be involved in this new project that I'm doing that will be out within a month. We have to do it very fast because it's a very urgent crisis that's creeping up on us right now, and so he's a good man. I've been working with him for over 10 years.
Wow.
Another one that I don't agree with all of his policies and positions, and he knows that. I've been very vocal with that. And as he said on a round table that we did together one day, he said, this is a beautiful thing, is Mikki and I can disagree and still love each other at the end.
Yeah.
And so I don't agree with all of his environmental policies. I think that he's bought into the climate narrative too deeply. As an environmental attorney, I think that he has seen a lot of the fake numbers that have left him thinking that it is an existential crisis, but he's also turning around with that. He is the beautiful thing about him is he's humble.
Yes.
He's highly intelligent, very well read. When he wrote an endorsement for my book, I literally had to have a thesaurus next to me and define every word that he was saying, because I'm like, this guy, you have to kind of dumb it down because he's really that intelligent. And I think people write him off sometimes because of the quality of his voice. But if you listen carefully, there's a reason he's in the position he's in, and there's no one better to do it. Yeah. Highly intelligent, highly compassionate, good man, really good man. And so he's changed a lot of his positions, and he came out after that roundtable we did because there were a lot of comments saying, that he didn't fully address my question about the existential threat. And he came out and said, I want to address that. And I will say that that narrative has been co-opted and exaggerated. And that was wonderful because he always does that. We had dinner here in Austin, Texas. And when he first started running as a Democrat, and he started during this dinner, he was talking about repeating all the Democratic narratives about Trump, xenophobic, racist, blah, blah, blah. And look, there's a lot of reasons. I totally understand why some people are repulsed by Trump. He's a very extreme character, doesn't always say what's appropriate, which I've kind of grown to like. But I can understand why some people don't. Mm-hmm. But he's none of those things. He's not a racist. He's not xenophobic. I know that. Marla Maples, his ex-wife, has been a dear friend of mine for years. And so I said at dinner, I said, Bobby, I said, just please don't make the mistake of running against Trump. That's what the Democrats are doing, and they're going to fail. What are you running for? Yeah. And shortly after that dinner, I was very impressed because he went straight out to the wall, which that's what he thought was xenophobic and horrible. He went out to the wall and learned about the sex trafficking, learned what was happening to women and children, learned about the fentanyl problem that's one of the number one killers of people in America 18 to 36 right now. Yeah. He learned it, and he turned the camera on himself, his own cell phone, and said, Trump was right. And not too many people at his level are willing to do that. So he's somehow managed to be to really wrangle in his ego. He could be really puffed up as a Kennedy, and come from I know it all, but he doesn't do that. And it's a beautiful one of his many beautiful qualities.
That's incredible. Now, we talked about the power of love earlier, but is laughter a key component of breaking down barriers? When I watched Plandemic, the movie, I nearly spat my tea out when Judy Mikovits popped up. Now, I'm not going to put a spoiler.
It's all right.
You hasn't seen it.
Just go ahead, spoil it. It's fine. If you haven't seen it by now, shame.
That was such a well-placed thing. It was so unexpected. And yeah, I spat me tea out. I laughed. I even went and got my wife and said, you've got to come and watch this. And I made her watch it, and we sat down and watched it again together.
My friends and neighbors, this is not going to end. This will never end until we end it. How long are we going to live in fear? How long will we live in fear?
They lied to us.
They've lied to every last one of us.
It's not like you weren't warned. And they called me crazy. Cheers.
Cheers.
And, laughter is the thing that, as well as love, that I find can't be challenged by the darkness. There's no way, if something presents itself at you and it's aggressive and it's nasty and it's evil, the moment you start laughing at it, it loses all its power. Do you try and weave a lot more laughter into some of the work you do, even though some of the work is a lot serious and the message is very serious? But is laughter always going to be a key component?
I hope so. I really hope so, because it's incredibly important. Laughter is medicine.
Yeah.
And so I love comedy. I used to be a comedy writer. And I might be directing a big comedy movie later this year, and I love it. I'm committed to straightening out the narratives of our world first.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to jump off into anything like that until I know that we're at a place where I feel that I can now go off and do something slightly mundane but fun. Comedy is never mundane because it serves a purpose. It's very important. I think it literally adjusts our personal vibration and lifts us up, and that's why they call it levity.
Yeah.
So I would love to put more comedy in what I do. You know, I'm in a business partner with JP Sears in our product Fierce Immunity, which people can find that at getfiercenow.com. Probably the best immune restoring product on the planet.
Yeah.
But I love JP because, you know, he always makes me laugh, and we've done some funny things together, and we plan on doing more. But I think it's a wonderful way to see the way that he has spoken really critical truths, and hasn't been shut down because he does it, you know, it's always laced with a laugh. And so comedy is a very powerful tool for us to tell truth, but to not further alienate people because they're laughing, and it kind of creates, it's almost like a delivery system, you know, it allows them to, it's like a chaser. You know, you take that nasty medicine with a little bit of orange juice and it's better. Yeah. And so that's what comedy does. So it allows us to take it deeper into our system. And so the answer is yes. I am really looking forward to our world being kind of back at a place of balance enough that I can invest more energy into developing more comedic movies and entertainment.
Yeah, no, that's great. One last thing now, and this is my opinion. I'd like to know what you think of this. I think the deaths and injuries that we're seeing from the safe and effective are a side effect of that vaccine, and obviously it's not sitting well within the people's bodies. My major concern is that the push to get this into so many people has another more sinister goal. Are you aware of anything behind its design and distribution that may be putting a platform into the bodies of people for when we're moving forward to their goals of certainly transhumanism and technology being merged with man? Is this shot something completely different to what we're thinking? And is the deaths and the injuries that you have catalogued within Follow the Silence a side effect of it, but not its full intent and purpose?
Okay, so now we're straying into the zone of opinion and speculation, and I'm happy to go there as long as it's clear to the people that I'm not saying this is fact. This is the domain of speculation.
Yeah.
But at this point, while I have no real hard evidence, it sure appears that, and I don't want to panic people who have received the vaccine, because it depends on how many you've had, how many boosters you've had, and it also depends on what batch you got, and it depends on your particular system, how strong it is, which is why it's incredibly important, which is why we did create Fierce Immunity. I don't mean to plug that, but the reason we created it is because people need to really restore their natural immunity, which could potentially eliminate the threat of what might be truly in the bloodstream at a immeasurable, level.
Yeah.
If you analyze the push to get this into everybody's bloodstream,
yeah.
If you consider that they also did it for free for a lot of people,
mm-hmm.
They spent trillions of dollars, definitely hundreds of billions of dollars, leading up to that operation, just to get everyone to put something experimental into their bloodstream. Then even when it was proven that it wasn't working and it wasn't flattening the curve and all these other catchphrases, that it was, they even knew, which we prove in Follow the Silence, that immediately from the trials, people were being injured, and they covered all that up and continued to push it into the bloodstream of people, and then to recommend it for children, and then to recommend it for pregnant women, When you look at all of this, it so surpasses any kind of logical thinking that you have to, at least if you're a thinking person, you have to wonder, is there another reason for it? Are they experimenting with perhaps changing the makeup of our DNA, of who and what we are, of perhaps severing our connection to the divine?
Yes.
I typically speak about it in terms of deadening the human soul. What is the soul? Well, that's the question. And that is why so many scientists don't believe in it, because they were trained that everything real you can put under a microscope and measure it.
Yeah.
But through the technocrats have discovered that they've already surpassed the human mind. AI is, far beyond what we could ever do with our minds.
Yeah.
But they can't even measure the human soul.
No.
And so when you understand that there is this thing that animates us, that gives us life, it's our life force. And I had a profound experience. I didn't know if I believed in this most of my life, but I had a profound experience in 2008 where I was driving down a single lane country road and I had to swerve around a flat bird, a dead bird on the road. And as I drove past it, that voice that at that time, it wasn't too frequently that voice spoke to me, but it said, out of nowhere, that bird is not dead. And I kept driving. What a crazy thought. The bird is obviously dead. It's flat. The bird is not dead. The bird is not dead. Finally, I got so frustrated because it wouldn't stop that I backed up and I rolled down my window and I looked at the bird and it's alive looking up at me. And it was spread out, and then I noticed there were power lines above it. It had been electrocuted and it was dying, but it wasn't dead. And I thought, what was that? Where did that information come from that knew something that was complete contrast to what I knew? I knew that bird was dead, but this intelligence knew something else, and it knew the truth. And so I felt this weird affinity immediately for this bird. And I picked it up, got out of my car, carried it to the side of the road, put it in the dirt, and I started saying a prayer for it. And I became totally tunnel visioned on the little glossy black eye of this bird. It was a blue jay, big blue jay, beautiful bird. Yeah. And as I was saying a prayer, the world disappeared. It was very similar when I later saw the Matrix movie, and they were, Morpheus was teaching Neo in this white void of a room, like all the rest is just, we make it up. This is the void of nothingness. Yeah. I was like, I've been there. Like, that's what happened. Everything just went white, and it was only the bird floating in this white space. And I had to keep my mind out of it to keep the experience happening. I couldn't think about it. I couldn't analyze the moment. I had to just be. And after I said my prayer, this bird's eye went from this glossy, animated, beautiful little mirror of life to just flat. Yeah. And the experience was, I didn't see anything leave its body, but I knew in the moment, the essence of that bird, its soul, just left. Yeah. And the moment that happened, hundreds, thousands of ants charged in to consume this bird from all directions. Not one ant came near it until that exact moment. And I stood back and I thought, wow, this is fascinating. Like, these little creatures that we discard as just little insects, little nuisance, they are more connected to this bird than I am. Yeah. They're waiting as a ritual in honor for the soul to leave before they came in to consume this bird and to repeat the cycle of life. Yeah. And I witnessed it. I'll never forget it. Once you see, you can't unsee. So then I became really curious about, what is this life force within us? What is this thing called spirit or called soul? Yeah. And then I read a quote from who's the guy that created Waldorf education?
Rudolf Steiner.
Rudolf Steiner, thank you. 100 years ago, Rudolf Steiner said there will come a day when greedy doctors will be entrusted the task of creating a vaccine that will be administered as early as birth, and its purpose will be to deaden the human soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I put all this together. I went, oh, geez. The soul is what is our umbilical cord to the divine, to God, to infinite intelligence. Without that connection, we are vulnerable and will need to be guided by others, by people, authority.
Yeah.
That's where they want us. When we have a higher source to guide us, then we can hear their BS. And we can say, no, thank you. I don't listen. You're not my God. I have a God. Thank you.
Yeah.
I listen to something much higher, much, much more intelligent than you that actually exists out of time. So that actually informs me of things that I can't see because I'm stuck in time. So it can tell me what to do in the future.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd rather listen to than your agenda of this moment to entrap me into your plan for my life when I'd rather follow God's plan.
Yeah. I'm glad it's not just me.
I'm glad too.
People will be like, "Oh, Chris, you're losing the plot," and probably they'll look at this and say, "Yeah, he's hearing voices now." But like, I've had it throughout my life where the voice has been in my ear so loud and so profound. I've spun round to see who was there. And of course, there was no one there. And then I'm stood there, and sometimes it will just be one word. I remember working on one of my cars at one point, and literally the word demonstrable came into my head. I didn't even know what the word was at the time, and I had to go and look it up. And it's these things are there to test us and to set us.
Those are the things, Chris, right? Like, we've all had those moments, and I've had so many moments where I am told something and I think, I've never learned that. I don't even know if that's true. But then I move into it. I'm like, who gave me that information? That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I'll give you one other example. I was offered $17 million after the first pandemic came out. I was offered $17 million to join with another company that was going to do a crowdfunding raise for me. Mm-hmm. And they guaranteed me $17 million. They had just raised $21 million in crowdfunding. And so their deal with me was, we'll raise $17 million for you. You get that. Everything over $17 million, we get. And they felt like because of the reach of pandemic that they could make a few $1 million off the pandemic brand. And they were really nice guys. I liked them. And I had said yes verbally. And then while we were solidifying the deal on our third phone call, that voice said, the answer is no, walk away. And it was like, I didn't want to say it because I thought, what? And so I finally ended up, because I know what happens when I deny that, listening to that voice. And so I said, anyway, backed out of the deal. And a couple of weeks later, those guys got indicted. They got set up. They didn't really do anything wrong, but because they were on the wrong side of politics, they got indicted.
Yeah.
And it would have taken me and Plandemic down with it.
Right.
And my friend who was brokering the deal called me and said, how did you know? Because he was mad at me because he was going to get a percentage of the deal. And when I backed out, he was not happy.
No.
But he said, you dodged a bullet, man. Like, how did you know that? And I said, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was wondering if I made the right decision. I just know I had to listen. And maybe I'd live to regret that decision. Like, there was that doubt in me of like, did I just sabotage me? Am I afraid to have that amount of money? What? But the voice said, no, walk away.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it was protecting me from a future event. Yeah. And that only happens when you're in a place of pure service, which is my work in the world, is keep purifying, keep asking myself, why would I say yes to this job? And is it for my personal gain? If it is, I probably will pass.
Yeah.
But if it's in service to humanity, if it's something that I'm going to be proud to show my children.
Yes.
Then I say yes and I move into that. And when you move into things for the right reasons, that protection comes with it. That kind of mystical, magical, godly experience intensifies. to where a lot of times I feel I make decisions editing. It's bizarre, but a lot of times I'll be editing thinking what I'm doing is great, and the voice will just say, erase it.
Yeah.
Start over. You know, and sometimes I fight it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, I don't have time. I'm on a deadline. I just keep going. And then lo and behold, something will come up and a bit of information will come up and I realize this is the wrong narrative. Start over.
Yeah.
So now when it happens, I just go, I don't need to know reason. I just trust. I'm going to start over and I'm going to find out why. I'm going to listen. Why start over? Please give me the answer. And sometimes it's given to me and I go, that makes sense. And then it's a much more powerful message that reaches the intended, the intention of why I'm even making the piece.
Yeah.
And it's wild. It's wild to live in that world. And so many people have no idea that exists.
No. And
but it really starts with the willingness to believe in something other than yourself.
Yeah. My wife is a shamanic energy healer. She trained under a gentleman called Alberto Villoldo at the Four Winds Society. And she taps into stuff every day. And every day she'll come and tell me something that's going to happen or what she's seeing or what's coming through. And because I have a certain understanding because of the plant medicine work I've done over the years, but for her, she doesn't need anything. She just taps directly into this. And I think what's so amazing is I'll think, maybe she's just, but it will always come about. It will always happen. What she says is going to happen. It just evolves and becomes what she says it is. And now I listen to her and it's a great way for me to guide. I'll take all the information I get from things. I'll listen to what she says and I'll apply it to it. And it's amazing how the dot connecting can happen when people become really open to all possibilities of what's out there.
Very, very true. And it's also very critical that when people start to learn how to, for lack of a better term, channel the information.
That's what it is.
That they never, ever make the mistake of confusing it with being their own.
Yeah.
It's the metaphor that I use to make sure that I never fall into the trap that I start to think, wow, I'm really cool.
Yeah. No.
And I remind myself, because sometimes when I go to certain events, I'll be rushed by people that are saying my movies saved their lives or saved their families' lives. Now, I'm glad that I'm at the age that I am right now, because if I were younger, that might affect me in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's what happens I worked in the New Age, movement for a long time, and a lot of those healers, a lot of the Deepak Chopras of the world, got caught up in their own persona so much that they lost the perspective of understanding they're just an instrument.
Yeah.
The metaphor that I use is, imagine if the stereo in your car started to think that all that music coming through it was producing. It's only receiving and broadcasting. But it deserves respect, because there are really cheap receivers and broadcasters that regenerate the music at a level that really kind of diminishes the quality and the spirit of the music.
Yeah.
And then there are finely tuned instruments that are made in such a way that the clarity of not only the receiver and broadcaster, but the speakers are designed, they're more expensive, and they were designed in a laboratory that actually allows for the purity of the spirit of the message of the music to be received fully in its intended form. And so that's to the degree to which we say, I'm grateful for this instrument, for all the work I've done, for all the trauma that I've dealt with, for all the pain, for all the challenges, for me to work through all of that, so that my instrument can be so finely tuned that I can be a broadcaster for divine intelligence in such a way that it's received in others, that it reminds them who, what, and whose they are.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, the amount of times I've written things down, and I've got up early hours of the morning, and the wife's got up to put the kettle on to make some tea, And she says, "What are you writing?" I said, "I don't know." I said,
Yeah.
when I read it back, I'll know what I'm writing. Because whatever wakes me up in the morning sometimes and puts the pen and the paper in front of me, and that starts flowing, and it might be an interview, it might be something that I want to put out there as a little video, I can't take credit for it. And
Do you remember Conversations with God? Remember that book?
It's.
You remember that book? No?
No.
Okay, so a man named Neil Donald Walsh, he was a friend of mine years ago, and he wrote a book, and I remember at the time thinking, I mean, it's a clever marketing tool, because his claim was he would just sit down and God would operate the pen.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a book called Conversations with God. And it's really profound. It's a little new agey, but it's really profound. And so he had a series of these conversations where he did just what you said, where it's like, I am just allowing this to happen. And a lot that came through him, he admitted later that I was learning from what my pen was teaching me.
Yeah.
And so it's an entire book, and I recommend it. It's probably 20 years old or more, but it's worth a listen to or a read, because it's really about that.
That sounds great. And I've heard stories of musicians and artists. I know the Moody Blues talked about the fact that a lot of their music was written without their knowledge. They just used to write these lyrics and it had just come out. And again, the amount of artists and talented people out there that are aware that they are channeling this through, really does lay credence to the fact that this connection to the higher self is there, and it's there for everyone to tap into, as long as they want to escape this program domain that unfortunately we reside in at this moment in time.
Well, think back on the earlier days of the Oscars and the Grammys.
Mm-hmm.
It was very common back then, before it became the corrupt institution that it is now. Both of those programs have been infiltrated totally. They don't award the best music anymore. They award the people that toe the line the most, that are willing to repeat their narrative within the lyrics of their songs, and people who bow down to the system is who they reward, for the most part. Every now and then one slips through the cracks, and it's wonderful to see that still. There's still a little bit of life there. But it was very common that the real work, those channeled pieces of music, movies that just came from someone's spirit so deeply. They worked on a movie for 10 years, and it was their life's art and work, and it was everything that experienced in their life led to the expression of the birth of this movie. Those people would get up on stage, and they didn't always have to be religious, but oftentimes within their thank you speech, they would say, "Thank you, God, because I don't know where this came from."
Yeah.
And as Hollywood has become more and more dark and demonic, people are afraid to say that now. And most of the people that do get the awards aren't inspired by God, but maybe by the other forces.
Yeah.
But that used to be very common, was for people to get up there. And I remember people saying, "I didn't know so-and-so was religious." They're not. They just know that song came through them and not from them. And so they would say, "Thank you to whoever allowed me to put my stamp on this song, because it wrote it." How often do we hear that? It wrote itself.
Yeah.
What is that? And that's what we have to get back to.
We do.
Because then we're in service. We're in pure service. But it does require this constant checking of really, like, what is motivating me right now? Why am I doing this? Is it the money? Is it fame? No. Is it for me to fill the voids in myself of how I feel about myself, so now I can feel better? Is it to, whatever it might be, that's not just, I am doing this because this is in service to humanity and the future. It's easy which is why they also want to, make having a family so passé and unwanted, because it's really easy for me to, what I say yes and no to is, how does this benefit my 13-year-old and 10-year-old? It's really easy. And if this has no benefit for them, I pass.
No, that's it. All we can say to people is live your life in absolute truth, and your soul will thank you for it, because that really is the thing. Now, Mikki, this has been An incredible talk. I think we went on a bit longer than we were expecting, but there was so much great content and conversation going on here. Be great to speak to you again in the future.
Anytime.
And as we always say here on the Atlantic Underground podcast, believe nothing and question everything. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers.